On today's show, the marathon road trip is now over for the Atlanta Hawks, and unfortunately it ends with a loss in Phoenix. We'll get into all of what unfolded in the early second half and much more, and all of that is coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1884 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night here on a Thursday evening into Friday. And today's podcast is going to be diving into what became a 123-115 loss for the Atlanta Hawks on the road in Phoenix. Before we get to that, though, I should encourage you at the top of the show to make us your first listen each and every day. Please subscribe to the podcast, check us out, and find us anywhere you get your podcast. Honestly, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're also on YouTube. Please like the video as you're watching it on that platform, and please share the podcast with your friends. It's our fifth show this week. It's been very busy for the Hawks. It's been out on the road for literally 2 weeks now, but we'll get into this game now. The Hawks fall to 500 again at 19-19 with this loss, and it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride as we'll get into as this podcast goes along. They were without Jalen Johnson again for the third straight time in the fourth in the last 5 games with a shoulder issue. There was a little bit of a scare with Bogdanovich coming in the night. He was downgraded to questionable, actually. Ended up playing fairly well, I thought, actually, off the bench in this one for Atlanta. But broadly speaking, the Hawks were 6-point underdogs, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. So they were not exactly expected to win this one on the road. They ended up losing again by 8, so it's kind of like in line with projections. And there's a key point here, and I'll just say this. It's something that I know is not going to be popular when I say it, because it's not always popular to be level-headed and give a little bit of nuance at the top of the show. But I kind of have to say this, I think, to stay on brand, and also because I just believe it. The Hawks went 2-4 on this 6-game, 2-week road trip, and they were projected to go exactly 2-4 on this road trip. Now, I know that does not excite anyone. I promise you that. Nor am I saying that it should really fire you up or get you pom-poms out or whatever. I'm not saying that, but 2-4 on a road trip is not a disastrous scenario. I thought the reactions that I was seeing and hearing people after the game tonight, during the game tonight, were way overboard. And I do understand some of that's just like emotional stuff that happens, and fans are fans, and I get that. But maybe it's because I talk about it every year. But when the Hawks go out west, it's difficult. Like, West Coast trips are really hard for teams on the East Coast. Like, it was the longest trip of the season, 2 weeks basically away from home. They were favored in 2 games out of the 6, and they won both of those games. It was not always pretty, especially against Utah, but they won those games. And then they were not just like coin flips. They were notable underdogs in all 4 of the games they lost. Obviously, it would have been better to steal one of those games. I'm not saying otherwise. They could have won tonight. Like, this is a game that was winnable for sure. The other 3 were a little bit more lopsided than the game was tonight, but still, they were not supposed to win any of them. And I know the margins are big on 3 of these games, and that's to set people off, and I totally understand that as well. But the losses do count the same, whether they're by 5 or 25, just to say that out loud. And also, this is probably the last time I say this on the show today, but it's worth noting the Hawks are just not very good without Jalen Johnson. Now, that seems simplistic, and I don't mean it that way, but I've been talking about this a lot on the show. If you're a new listener, you have to trust me or listen to other episodes, but we can litigate why that is and the roster issues and all things that I've been talking about extensively for weeks and weeks now. But the Hawks have quite literally a negative 12 net rating with Jalen off the floor this season. They are bad when he doesn't play. And he missed 4 of the games on this road trip. They actually won one of them without him, which is actually kind of a surprise. But, of course, that was, I guess, a bad opponent in Utah. So just zooming out for 1 second at the top of the show, taking a deep breath, evaluating things a little bit, it is definitely fair to say that it is underwhelming to go 2-4 on this road trip. No question about that. Underwhelming is fair. What's not fair is to call it a disaster or some kind of catastrophe or whatever. It's not. 2-4 would have been a perfectly reasonable projection coming into this road trip. I think 3-3 would have obviously looked and felt better. Anything above that obviously would have been great. But for a team that is basically a 500 team right now, on the whole, to go 2-4 on a trip when they're playing against 4 quality teams, they lost those 4 games. It is what it is. If they had lost to Toronto and Utah, certainly I understand the freak out, because those are bad teams, but they won those games. That didn't happen. And I really can't muster the outrage, even if I'll get into, like, look, on this podcast, I'll discuss stuff that did not go well tonight in Phoenix. Like, it was not a great performance from the Hawks in some ways. There were some choices that I didn't love, like Quinn Snyder, for instance, and some players that didn't play well, et cetera, all those things. But I had to leave with that just out of just making myself stay on brand, basically, just because I believe what I said, and also it just kind of needs to be said, I think, at the top of the show. To the actual game. I'll start here. Two things can be true at once in this game. Defensively, it was worse than it was on offense on the whole for 48 minutes. It was a defense-first loss on the whole. With that said, I think the offense flatlining after halftime was probably more responsible for the loss on the whole, if that makes sense. So I'll go to the offense first and breaking things down. They had a 119 offensive rating in this game. That's really, really good. Now, Phoenix is not a great defensive team, but they're well coached by Budenholzer, old friend, of course. And the Hawks shot 47% from three in this game. You can't ask for much more than that. Not a ton of volume, only 15 of 32, but still, they made a ton of threes in this game, especially in the first half. They have 32 assists and 11 turnovers. That's a great ratio. Good ball movement in the entire game for the Hawks. But in the second half, the shooting evaporated, and that kind of led to the offense evaporating. They scored 43 points after halftime on 15 of 41 from the field and 3 of 14 from three. So the volume went down, the accuracy went down. They had a 90 offensive rating after halftime against just an okay or worse defense. And that isn't going to get it done. So obviously there was some regression that kind of had to happen after the first half when the Hawks just made every three basically before halftime. But they didn't do much on the offensive glass outside of Capella in this game. And here's one for you. They were 5 of 21 from floater range, which is that like 3 to 10 foot range, shorter twos, not right at the rim, but they just couldn't make that shot. That's a terrible percentage. It's like bottom 10 percentile in the league. And that obviously hurt them a little bit here. And yeah, again, they ran super hot before halftime. That was not sustainable. But the shot quality also got worse. As Quinn said post-game, I think I agree with him 100% on this. The shot quality after watching the game again was much worse in the second half, on top of some of the regression that was always going to happen. And that combination led to a really, really rough offensive half of basketball for the Hawks that kind of left them not without a ton of momentum. And honestly, it got better at the end of the game. It was even worse than that until like the last 5 minutes of the game. On defense, they had a 128 defensive rating, and that kind of speaks for itself. That means the Suns scored almost 1.3 points per possession in the game. That's really rough. It did improve after halftime. I said this during the game, actually, late. I was like, look, the defense actually got better in the second half. Unfortunately, it was the offense got worse at a more rapid rate and more steep fall off than the defense. But the first half was rough defensively. Now, Phoenix is very good on offense when they have their guys available. They are now 15-6 this season with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker both playing. Those are two of the top 15, 20 players in the league. Like, they're really good when they play together. With that said, the Suns also pulled Yusuf Nurkic out of the rotation for the first time this year, and that worked for them. They were actually much more weaponized offensively, I thought, without him on the court. But they still shot 58% from the field and 39% from three. The Hawks did actually not allow them a ton of shots from three-point range, volume-wise, but they made a bunch of them. And if you recall a second ago, I said the Hawks went 5 of 21 on floater range shots. That's less than 25%, right, on those same shots. Well, the Suns took 21 shots from that range as well, but they made 14 of them. So one team made 5 of 21, the other team made 14 of 21. So the Suns scored an extra 18 points on the same exact, not same exact shots, but same range shots that the Hawks did. And that's a big swing in the game. I'm not saying that's like the whole reason why the Hawks lost, but that is a big swing. The Suns were more effective when they got into the lane in this game. The Hawks did win the turnover battle defensively. That was probably their only bright spot on defense. I'll get to it later, but I did not like that Zachary Richer only played 19 minutes in this game. I thought defensively in particular, the Hawks were much better when he played. And by the way, the number said that as well. They had a 110 defensive rating with Richer on the court in this game, which is quite good, especially in a game where you give up like a 130 overall. So yeah, that's one thing. I don't want to overstate that. One thing that I don't like that fans technically do sometimes is like they place emphasis on one player that like ruins everything in every game or whatever. Offensively, it's whatever player doesn't make shots that night, or Capella, or whichever guy is 1 for 5 from three, or whatever it is. And defensively, I'm not saying Richer was the reason why they were the only defensive strong points in this game, but that was a notable thing to me, given the length that he has, etc. But look, outside of Devin Booker, who didn't make threes in this game, Phoenix's guys all shot it really well, and they are very, very good offensively when they have their guys. Does I give the Hawks an excuse? No, that's just context. People always say that I give excuses. That's not what this is. I try to give you the actual context for what actually happened in this game. Phoenix is really good on offense. The Hawks were also not good on defense, to be very, very clear in this game. So overall, the Hawks played 1 awesome half of offense, 1 pretty bad half of offense, and 2 not great halves defensively. There was one that was better than the other one for sure. But in the end, it's an 8-point loss. The Hawks were competitive. This was a game until the final minutes of this one, but an unsatisfactory or unsatisfying loss at the end of the road trip. But still, back to 1919 on the season. And overall, by the way, through 38 games, it's been pretty much fine, I would say, for the Hawks. Anyway, we'll have more of that later on in the podcast and going into next week. But in the meantime, later on in this show, I will get into kind of how this game unfolded with more details and observations throughout this game, my rotation thoughts, etc., plus some thoughts on the player-by-player evaluations, who played well, who didn't, etc. But first, we'll get to our partners on the podcast in just one moment. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering about your taxes? Well, that's actually a thing of the past now. You see, taxes do not actually need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game. I'm matching you with a TurboTax expert who gets to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're actually missing out on deductions. Whether you got one form or 20 forms, TurboTax experts can actually give you taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what actually really matters in your life. You won't have to lift a finger, but you will get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Are you ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guarantee? Head over to TurboTax.com. That is TurboTax.com right now today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you actually focus on your day and things that are more important to you. Only available now at TurboTax Live with Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, we'll dive in now to how this game kind of unfolded. And defensively, it was Dyson Daniels on Devin Booker for the most part in this one. He did a good job on Booker overall, as you might expect. And then it was a kitchen sink against Kevin Durant. It was Ricochet to begin the game. There was some Hunter. There was some David Roddy, as we'll get to later on Durant. And I'm sure it was cool for Ricochet, just as a note here. Durant is the player that he has named the most in his interviews as like the guy he's modeled his game after, a guy that he looks up to in the draft process, etc. I'm sure it was a sort of surreal moment for Ricochet to play against him for the first time in the NBA. But kind of an uneven offensive start for the Hawks in this one. They turned the ball over a few times early on. There was a pretty gorgeous lob from Trey to Capella early on, but the Suns kind of struck first. They had a 12-0 run mid-first quarter to put the Hawks down by 12 points. That was a little bit of they were playing from behind a lot after that. Not the entire game. They were actually leading briefly by a little bit in the third quarter, but still. Rotationally, no big surprises, but they did go a little bit deeper tonight. David Roddy returned to rotation after he did not play at all on Tuesday. The other guys who played, as you might expect, Hunter, Bogdanovich, and Kongwu, plus a sprinkling of Garrison Matthews as well. You might remember this. Roddy actually played in Phoenix last year. And spoiler alert, Roddy actually had a really good offensive flurry in this one. He hit 3 threes in the first quarter. So the first stint from him did not work out disastrously poorly for the Hawks. Overall, they were minus 2 in his minutes, but I thought he actually was giving them more than you would expect because of the shot making that he gave them in this game. Also, DeAndre Hunter got 3 fouls in his first 5 minutes of action, and that was not a good sign on a night without Jalen Johnson. He ended up playing 27 minutes, which is fine for him with 4 fouls in total, but that was not a good start. Kind of led to some more of Roddy minutes, etc. There was a very, very strange and bad challenge by an old pal like Budenholzer, who I enjoyed covering in Atlanta. But one of the worst challenges I've seen all year, honestly. I don't really know what he was even seeing. He called one on, it was kind of a no-hoper, trying to get a Durant foul overturned. They did not have that happen, so that's notable in that way. But I'll say this, like the first quarter in particular, really the whole first half, there was a shot-making exhibition on both sides, honestly. The Hawks were down by 7 in the first quarter. The Suns didn't miss a 2-point shot for the first 11 minutes of the game. They were, I think it was 11 for 11 to begin the game from 2, and they only missed 1 in the whole first quarter. Honestly, it was probably the worst defensive quarter of the season, results-wise, for the Hawks. Even in a slow-paced game, they were allowing about 1.6 points per possession. In that first quarter, it was really rough, but they did make 7 threes on offense to kind of stay alive in the game and be down only by 7. Honestly, if you just look at the defensive profile in the first quarter, and we're like, all right, they're down by 20. And they weren't. They were in the game because of the offensive shot making. Now, the Suns were still shooting 76% from the field after about 16 minutes in this game, which is a wild stat. But the Hawks made a bunch of threes. Phoenix actually did miss some shots finally in the middle of the second quarter. I thought Capella had been really bad to that point, but he actually had a good stretch defensively in that stretch. I will say this, there was a genuinely hilarious possession where Capella kind of went as like point guard on the floor, drew a foul somehow, some way, and got to the line, made both free throws, but that was a funny possession that was ugly to say the least. But the Hawks did have a 13-2 run late in the first half, take the lead, actually. Bogey had his best stretch in a while off the bench in that one, and then Trey was awesome at the end of the quarter with 9 points in about 3.5 minutes. The Hawks were up by 4 at the end of the first half. They were better defensively, I would say, in the second quarter than they were in the first. They also made 12 threes. They were 12 of 18 from 3 in the first half, which, again, not sustainable. But I will say this, they had 0 turnovers in that quarter on the way to 41 points. It was really an excellent quarter of basketball from the Hawks on the whole, and they had about a 150 offensive rating in the first half. Not sustainable, but certainly was part of why they were up, actually, by 4 points at halftime. By the way, that was their largest lead of the game. So the largest lead of the game was actually directly at halftime. Made it a little bit misleading to some degree. But came out at halftime, though, and the Suns actually scored the first 7 points of the second half. The Hawks missed their first 5 shots. A little bit of an omen for later on. The margin, though, actually, in the third quarter, it was very close and very back and forth. The margin on the scoreboard was not more than 4 points in either direction for 10 full minutes. It was basically just trading buckets, trading stops, et cetera, et cetera. But the Hawks blinked first. The Suns went on a 7-0 run late in the quarter. There was a little bit of a gaffe at the end of the quarter defensively that I want to note. The Hawks went with a no center lineup defensively on the final possession, which in itself is not a problem for me. There's a theory there. You can kind of switch everything, et cetera, especially against a team like Phoenix that's not playing a big center anyway. But they had a lot of layup to Bradley Beal at the buzzer. B. Krejci got beat off the dribble. And I think, if you're going to do that, you want to have Rishi on the floor as their longest guy that's not a center on the roster available tonight without Jalen, et cetera. So I didn't love that deployment, and then gave up a layup there that was ill-timed. They were down by 6 at the end of the third quarter. It was fine, but the offense did sputter. Only 20 points in that quarter, and they shot 34% from the field. It was pretty rough offensively, which was an omen for later on. As I sort of picked on Mike Budenholzer earlier for his poor challenge, Quinn lost 1-2 in the fourth. It was not quite as bad as Budenholzer's was. In fact, it was a strange play. Trey reacted immediately, he thought it was off the Suns. There was some confusion. Quinn challenges it. It wasn't a high leverage play, but it looked to me on replay like everybody else saw the same thing I did. I thought it hit Booker's hand still after they lost the challenge, but they lost that one. They burned the timeout. Didn't bite them too much, but still kind of a weird moment there. The big, though, thing was, as I said before, offensively is where they kind of lost this one, and it really happened here. They scored 25 points in the first 17 minutes of the second half, and that's not going to get it done against a team like Phoenix. It just wasn't going to happen. They were shooting 30% from the field in that span. That's when they lost. Now, granted, they were still in the game after that, but Phoenix had kind of cooled off to kind of open the door a little bit for the Hawks, and they couldn't run through because they just couldn't score in that span. A couple weird rotation things I want to note as well. They had Garrison Matthews in the game a little bit late into the fourth quarter, despite him having not played much at all in the first 3 quarters. Not that he was bad, just kind of a weird deployment choice. But Rishi hadn't played very much, and he should have played more in this game, which we'll come back to later on. They did set up the rotation to close with the Kongwu, which I agreed with, because I thought he was better than Capella in this game. But Clint did have a great possession with about 8 minutes to go, where he actually had 2 blocks and a steal on the same possession. You don't often see that in a game. But I thought Rishi, before he sat down on the bench, had a big 3-point play with 6 minutes to go. They were down by 10. It was teetering big time there. But I thought, honestly, at that moment in time, I was like, oh, they might close with Rishi in this game. And then he didn't come back in the game the rest of the game, which I did not like at all. Here's the swing. They were down 6 with about 4 minutes to go after a 3 by DeAndre Hunter. But then Durant hit a 3 on the end of the floor. The Hawks missed a 3. And then Tyus Jones made a 3. So that was a 6-0 swing there to put the Hawks down by 12 with 4 minutes to go. That was probably where they lost the game in some respects in a mini sample size. Then the Hawks called timeout. They had empty possession. Then Phoenix hit another 3. So it was a 9-0 run to go up by 15 points with about 3.5 minutes to go. And I tweeted this at the time, they're in deep trouble. And people were like, no, this game's over. I'm like, no, it's not over. Obviously, you were a big underdog, down 15. But it's not like you're down 25. And the Hawks really did have a chance. Everything went right for them for a little while. They got 5 straight stops defensively, which is a key part of coming back in a game. And they're down 5. And Trey had a pretty good look at a 3 with a minute 20 left. They would have made it. They would have made it a 2-point game. Now, you're not guaranteed to win that game if he makes that shot, but you are very firmly in the game if that goes in. It didn't go in, and then Phoenix scored, and it was kind of the end of the game. But they were kind of back in it. Now, that kind of juices the numbers a little bit late. I think the Hawks scored 10 or 15 points in the final 4 minutes to get back kind of in competitive looking offense in that fourth quarter. But they did, to their credit, as they have really all year long. I poke fun at Quinn sometimes for not pulling the plug early enough, and I do stand by that in blowouts. But they do have a knack for being resilient and playing to the end. And the comebacks that have happened this year, of course, the famous one was against the Bulls, but they are pretty resilient late in games, which I want to note them for. And again, they were one shot away from making this game pretty darn interesting at the end. Unfortunately, it didn't fall. And just to give the numbers one more time about the offense in the second half, they ended up with a 90 offensive rating, and they shot 15 of 41 from the field and 3 of 14 from three. And that led to 43 points, and that was probably why they could not overcome the Suns. Okay. I will point out again later on about the rotation stuff with Ricochet, etc. When we get to player-by-player about evaluations. There's plenty to get to there about who played well, who didn't, etc. in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Has Rocket Money helped you find subscriptions that you actually forgot about, or you might have been paying for twice, perhaps? That's happened to me for sure. I had a few subscriptions that in the past have not been even realized that I was paying for, and they made it also easy to track them down in one place. At Rocket Money, it's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps you lower your bills as well, so you can actually grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, perhaps even the goals that you want to hit this year. And at Rocket Money, they have over 5 million users, and they've saved people a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. Members have saved up $740 a year when using all the app's premium features at Rocket Money. They have this awesome feature called Goals, and because of that, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stress about budgeting every single month. You can cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with the folks at Rocket Money. The place to go is rocketmoney.com/locked-on, and do that right now today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. One more time, the place to go, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. All right, so broadly speaking in this game, I don't think anyone was like outstanding for Atlanta. The only guys that I would say like played like well above their recent baseline was Bogey and maybe David Roddy. Everybody else was like either okay or not so good, but like no like true like outlier great performances in this one, which probably led to some of the issues for Atlanta. 10 guys played, as I said before. Roddy played 10 minutes. That was the fewest of anybody. He had 11 points on 5 shots. So like it was kind of the best Roddy experience. Offensively, he clearly helped them. He hit 3 threes in short order. He was efficient. But defensively, he gave a lot back. So, like, I'm not trying to pick on Roddy. This is an example of it going well. And there was still -2 with Roddy on the court because defensively, he gives a lot back. But I thought he did a good job on the whole. Nice to have him kind of get a good night on the horizon. And obviously, you'd rather have Jalen Johnson playing. I didn't have a problem trying Roddy in this game necessarily, but we'll see how they handle things when they get back to Atlanta starting on Saturday. Garrison Matthews played 11 minutes, 6 points, had an assist, 2 of 4 from 3. Kind of a low-key game. Like, I was a little bit weird like how they used him, but I thought he was fine on the whole. Not too much to add there other than just like, I want to see him shoot the ball a lot, and he did that mostly in his 11 minutes of this game. Okongwu, 8 points, 6 assists for Nneka. Nice night for him on the passing front. 5 rebounds, had a block shot, +7 in the game. He was 4 of 6 on 2s, 0 of 1 from 3. He was their best center in this game for sure. He was better than Capella. I thought he was pretty good. Not like he was awesome or dominant, but I thought he had a pretty good game. It's also a better matchup for him. Phoenix is a team that was basically playing only one actual center, and it's Mason Plumlee, who's not really anything forceful on offense. So they were able to play smaller, and that kind of leans in Okongwu's direction compared to Capella for sure. I thought he was better than Capella was in this game. Hunter had a rough one. The fouls early on kind of threw him off a little bit. He had 12 points. He was 1 of 2 on 2s, only 2 of 7 from 3. Did have 4 assists, 2 steals, 3 turnovers. Like I thought he was not terrible, but defensively, not his best night at the office after the fouls early. And then offensively, like he wasn't terrible, but like I think people were talking about how he struggled on the road trip. Hunter was certainly going to have some regression after that stretch he had where he was just making every shot. I think his baseline is a little bit higher than it was tonight and lower than it was before. We'll see where that kind of water level gets found. But I thought he was just like okay to not great. And he actually had the worst of the bench plus minuses in this one. And then Bogey was really good actually in this game, which is nice to see. If you missed it yesterday, I did a mailbag question on Bogey on the show about like whether it was time to panic on him basically. My consensus was no. Like there's some worry about him at his age for sure with the way he'd been playing. But he looked good in this game. He looked a little bit springier. He had 17 points on 11 shots. He was 4 or 5 on twos, 3 assists, 2 steals. And look, his defense is not good. That's not going to probably change, honestly, at this point. But he was +8 in a game they lost by 8. So he gave him some juice in this game, a couple of nice moments, and baby steps forward. So you want to celebrate about one good game for Bogey, but I thought it was good to have him out there. And notable, I think my friend David Lee said this as well in real time. It's just true. When Bogey's got this going, it's easier to navigate the non-trade minutes in general. And that has always been the case. The Hawks have always been their best with Bogey when he's actually playing well. But it really does help a lot right now if Trey has to sit, if Bogey actually has some juice, and he did in this game. To the starters, Ricochet. So stop here. 19 minutes for Ricochet, 5 points, 2 rebounds. Like, wasn't like he was like tearing the doors off the place. I understand that. But he had a steal, +4 in the game. The Hawks defended well when he played in a game where they did not defend well without him. That's notable to me. And it's been lost all season long with Ricochet, in my opinion. I did a full check-in on him about a week and a half ago on the show if you missed that. But he's already a pretty solid defender. He's not like a game-changing all-NBA defender right now, but he is 6'9", 6'10", with long arms, and he can contest shots and be a help defender. He's in the right places at the right times, generally speaking. He will execute. He's a good athlete defensively. Like, it helps. Without Jalen, like, he's the only guy like that. Because Hunter is a decent defender. He's not a great one by any means at all. He's a lot smaller as far as like reach and range than Ricochet is. All that said, like, they were better defensively with him in the game, and I thought he should have played more. Now, that's been a theme this year. People always ask me why. Good luck getting a straight answer from Quinn Snyder. He's not going to ever tell you. But we do ask things. People are like, well, what did you ask him? Like, I've asked him several things. He doesn't really answer things. But at the same time, I think it's a combination. My best guess, anyways, like, he's still a rookie, so there's some trust issues there, probably maybe some management of his minutes. But I thought he should play more tonight, and he didn't play enough, in my opinion. Elsewhere in the starting lineup, Vit Krejci, 26 minutes, 12 points, 6 assists, 1 turnover. I thought offensively, Vit was pretty good. He hit 3 threes. I think they were all in the first half. The passing was good. Defensively, it was pretty rough for Vit. I'll go back to what I said this summer. The whole theory of Vit from last season, late in the year when he was playing really well, was that the Hawks needed him to have at least one of his shooting or his defense persist from last year's breakout. And this year, it's been a little bit of neither and a little bit of both at times. Like, Vit shot the ball, like, not terribly, 32%, I think, coming into the night. He made 3 threes, so that'll probably go up a little bit here. But defensively, it was pretty rough in this game. He's had some nice moments. I thought he was better defensively in the game on Tuesday, actually, than he was tonight. But he wasn't awful, but he just was okay in the lineup. Capella, as I said before, I thought was their worst of the 2 centers in this game. 10 points, 11 rebounds. They had 2 blocks and a steal, 2 assists. Like, he wasn't nearly as bad as people were saying that he was in this game. He did miss 7 shots from the field. I think at least 3 of those were missed, like, tip-ins, so I think it's hard to keep those away from him. But I thought he was not particularly good. Yes, it's a bad matchup for him, but he'll have better nights for sure. He was not good, especially in the first half of this game. So cross that one off a little bit on that front. And if anything, they probably should have played Okongwu more than he did in this game. Dyson was fine, 36 minutes for him. Actually, the highest on the team. 13 points, 3 assists, 3 steals, 4 rebounds. He was -9, which is like not his fault necessarily. He was only 1 of 2 from 3, but was 5 of 10 on 2s. Like, he wasn't great offensively, as he sometimes isn't, but defensively, he was the best guy they had. Like, he did hold Booker in check. Booker was the only of the standouts for Phoenix that did not have a big game. He had 20 points on 21 shots. That is attributable to Dyson, I would say, to some degree. So he did his job there, still wrecked the game with 3 steals. Like, he did a good job and played well on the whole. And then Trey, it wasn't a great Trey game by any means. Like, he wasn't bad either, but 21 points on 19 shooting possessions is like okay. I actually did a Hawks Live hit tonight on the pregame show, if anybody saw that, where I was asked to come on and talk about Trey a little bit with the efficiency. And it's a great example of that. So in this game, Trey shoots 40% from the field in the game, which is not great. But if you throw in his actual efficiency in true shooting, he ends up like 55%, like, which is not good, but it's like league average-ish. So it's a good example of that. He got to the line 9 times, made 8 of them, etc. Had 7 assists. 7 assists actually the lowest it's been for a while. Trey's averaging 12.2 coming in. Actually, this is his lowest assist game since before Christmas. So he'd been on a run of giving a lot of assists in the game. In fact, his season low is 5 which only happened once. I think he's been above that. It's been like above 7 or 8 in almost every game since then. Anyway, he was okay. He wasn't great. And I think that if he had been better, certainly the Hawks going to pull this one out. I don't think it was because of him, but he'll have better nights for sure. All right, I'll leave that there for now. The Hawks, again, broadly speaking, it wasn't like a disastrous performance. I think it kind of builds on the other loss that they had on this road trip. But if you asked me to grade this performance, it was like a C-. It wasn't an F by any means. It wasn't even a D probably. It was just okay to below average, and Phoenix has played well, and they won. Okay, I'll leave it there for now. The Hawks now, of course, are done with the road trip. Finally, they're back at home, and we'll get to see them in person on Saturday afternoon. I will say this. It's not quite a back-to-back, but it's as close to back-to-back as you actually get without it being one. The Hawks now have this late-night game in Phoenix, 9 o'clock start Eastern time. Finish the game. They will fly overnight. They're in the air probably as I'm talking to you right now in the middle of the night here on a Friday morning. And then they play again on Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So it's not a back-to-back, but it is a very, very fast turnaround, especially after a 2-week trip to the West Coast. So it's that, let's just say, not a favorable schedule spot for the Hawks on Saturday. Plus, they're facing the Rockets, who are good. Houston played in Memphis tonight, which is a lot closer than Phoenix to Atlanta. They also won in Memphis, and Houston is 25-12 this year. They are playing very well. We'll see how the situation is with Jalen on Saturday, but this is a bad spot for the Hawks. Like, this is not a good situation. The Rockets are better than the Hawks are. They have the better travel situation. We'll see. It's an afternoon game, though, kind of a sleepy spot for everybody involved. I don't know why the game's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it is on Saturday. So we'll have a new show after that game on Saturday afternoon/evening. Yeah, that's all I have on today's show. Please subscribe to the podcast. Smash that button anywhere you like to find your podcasts. Apple, Spotify. We're also on YouTube. Please like the video as you're watching it. This one right now on that platform. And again, we're anywhere you get your podcasts. And please tell your friends about the podcast as well. You can follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. I am there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky personally at BT Rowland. And then you can follow my Patreon content at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the show. As always, enjoy your Friday and Saturday. And we'll see you after the game on Saturday evening.